Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host, Bill Stierle. And, Bill, you and I have been sort of teasing for a couple episodes here that we're going to talk about this documentary called After Truth, Disinformation, and the Cost of Fake News. And today's the day. We're going to talk about it. And although I think, truthfully, just so our listeners understand, you and I have spent more time researching and talking about this one off of recording than we do many other topics that we've talked about. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on this. There's a lot to chew on this one, but we definitely want to recommend that listeners check out this documentary. It's on HBO. So if you have an HBO account or HBO.com, you can get it, or also, HBO Go app on any of your TV streaming services. Highly recommend you check it out. And we're going to talk about some of it today. So if you haven't watched it yet, spoiler alert, we are going to talk about it. But I really don't think anything we say is going to in any way take away from your viewing experience watching it, even if you haven't seen it yet. This documentary, I think, does a very good job at pointing out how easy it is for disinformation to be created and to be propagated, meaning spread like wildfire. Don't you agree, Bill?
I agree. I agree from the standpoint, Tom, that our minds are very sensitive to trying to figure out truth in our world, in order to create an experience of two really important needs of ours being met: the need for certainty and the need for stability in a changing world. As I mentioned to one of my clients recently, we are not used to the volume of information that we have access to. We're not used to the accessibility of information, real and imagined, or real and illusionary, or real and fake. We're not used to, our brains aren't used to this. We used to maybe get a chance to talk about it, once a week, once a month, only on holidays, once a quarter, maybe a little around the water cooler. That's not the way this is going. If you want to know what Tom Hanks' birthday is, all you got to do is ask, and you know what it is. And there could be a disinformation campaign that says, Tom Hanks is 10 years younger than what he is. And that's what will show up at the top of Google, because more people are searching for the falsehood rather than the real fact. And that's one of the things I love about this movie, is that it says we need to clean up our core resource for information, because it's a lot of junk at the front end. If you look up Pizzagate, it's telling you an entire untruth about a Comet Pizza in Washington, D.C. It is unsettling because it took off. It got a lot of clicks. It made a lot of money for advertisers. Google, Facebook, Twitter made a lot of money, but at the expense of truth and expense of the physical and emotional health of others.
Well, it's that last part, Bill, that is a point that this documentary makes very loud and clear. And what to me was so fascinating is that, not only did this disinformation catch fire, I mean, it really spread like a wildfire uncontrollably to the point where it really purchased truth of this man
Right.
who took it upon himself to drive, I believe, from North Carolina to Washington, D.C.
That's right. Yep.
with a AR-15 style assault rifle because he truly believed. And I'm going to tell you, obviously, everybody who's interested needs to watch this movie and form their own opinion. I'm telling you from my perspective, watching this film and what I had read and learned about this issue in the news back in 2016 when this took place, that this man truly believed that there were people in the basement of Comet Pizza or in some back room, which, by the way, when he got there, he found out there, in fact, is no basement.
No basement.
But he believed there were people that were being physically abused, held against their will.
Kids.
Children, too, in this pizza parlor. And he could not live with himself if he just sat by understanding that, believing that to be true. So this man took action and drove up to North Carolina, walked right into Comet Pizza during business hours with this assault rifle in hand, and is literally just looking throughout the entire restaurant, looking in cabinets, looking behind, the main desk, looking at the kitchen, walking to the back of the store, opening closet doors, and not asking anybody's permission, just doing it.
Right.
And, of course, the movie takes you through what happened as the staff realized what was happening, and they're trying to get everybody quietly to leave the store because they don't want anybody to be harmed. And somebody calls the police. But eventually, what is shocking and really illuminating, and what makes me believe this man believed he was doing a public service when he went in there with his gun. The police surrounded the place. He couldn't find anybody being abused. He couldn't even find a space where really people could have been being stored. And he walks back out the restaurant, and the police have surrounded the place. They give him orders. They all have guns pointed at him. Drop your weapon, turn around, put your hands behind your head, walk backwards, lie prone on the ground. They arrest the guy. He complied with the officer's instructions. This is my point here, right, Bill? He complied with the officer's instructions, and they asked him, "What are you doing here?" And he answered truthfully, "I was here to help save some people that were, being held against their will." And when one officer who's arresting him says, "What?" And the other officer says he's talking about Pizzagate. So even one of the arresting officers knew about the disinformation about this restaurant. So it is just so mind-blowing how disinformation like this, Bill, can really brainwash somebody.
Yeah. And the emotional experience of the man laying down and getting handcuffed is relieved. Not anything else but relieved. I feel relieved to find out for myself that nothing was happening here. Sure, you can arrest me. I feel relieved because I needed to solve this thing in my head because I needed to trust that kids were being safe. And the only way I could do it is because I was told that kids were not safe. I have 2 daughters myself. I would feel horrified if I found out if it was, if I didn't do anything about it. Where I heard this from, Alex Jones said that I'm going to go down there myself. Of course, somebody should go down there and take this on. and he was, Alex Jones was a part of the process of stirring the pot. When a person need for protection and safety isn't met, human beings naturally want to protect other human beings naturally. And this is why our military budget's so high, is we've been fed that. Remember World War II, when the Japanese, we weren't ready for the Japanese. We should have known about that. Oh, we need a bigger military. Oh, see the Germans, well, no one knew that there was concentration camps. We didn't find out about concentration camps until we got there. It's like, yikes. And those kinds of, we need to know information to make our world safe, can be easily hijacked by people that are representing themselves as news, but are really just providing a form of disinformation to get a viewership, to get clicks. So this is the what of the problem. And the why of the problem is that the viewers meeting needs of theirs. They're going like, hey, my need for safety isn't met. Well, I'm going to watch Fox News because they talk to me about my values, my worldview, my perspective. These are things I believe that, the government is keeping this, secret. I've been watching this on TV for years. So it's really disheartening and sad to see that we've gotten ourselves into this place. But it's also, gosh, just the reality is that at no time in human history have we had this much information accessible to us.
Well, and it's like it's all being thrown at us. I like to use the analogy of, somebody's got one of these machines that will shoot tennis balls at you from across the court so you can, keep swinging when there's no one there. And
Right.
they just have it on rapid fire, and they're just firing tennis ball after tennis ball at you. And there's no way you can hit them all or catch them all, right? We are overloaded with information. So it's not all that shocking that many people do not take the time to vet or question all the information that they are exposed to.
Yeah, it's really, really unsettling. I mean, the thing for me that is challenging is that our society has softened itself up through TV. And for a TV show, let's say, for example, The X-Files, it was on the air for 9 years, highly rated show, 202 episodes. I mean, it, and what was it about? A government conspiracy, and our two heroes trying to uncover about aliens. And for years, that belief propaganda thing was supposed to be for entertainment, not supposed to be for doubt government, doubt the people that are in charge. That's kind of like, the warming up. Now, that's not the only place that the distrust of government shows up. That shows up basically, one of the earlier places is Ronald Reagan saying, the worst sentence you can hear is, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. It's like, but you're going to run the government. That was a sentence that got him elected. That the government is bad news. The answer is, I don't think you're really, you're really seeing what the job that you're signing up for, big guy. And the answer is that, yeah, he said what he needed to say to get elected, because there were people that believed that the government should take more of a role, and the other people group would say government needed to take less of a role in helping people with their independence and their identity and stuff. Well, what are we dealing with right now? The election's a fraud. You can't trust government. I'm going like, oh my gosh, this is the end. This is the end of the head of the snake. This is the shit that's coming out at the end. it's, oh my gosh, this is the disconnection, regrettably, that's showing up in the world. So
my goodness,
we do need to fight truth inside our mind, and we do need to use different tools and communication techniques so that we can really get truth where it needs to be, which is more of a process. So, but this film has really done a really pretty good job of saying this is how truth is purchased through the strategy of disinformation. I'm going to disinform somebody in order to create a sway of things. Don't do this.
Well, so Bill, one of the things that is illuminated in this film is that a community of people in Texas had their truth purchased based on some U.S. military training that was going to be conducted in, a part of Texas for an 8-week period of time. And it's a very interesting thing that goes on there. And the one thing that, and the reason I bring it up now is what you just mentioned about people and what they believe. But one of the things that strikes me, it's so challenging for, it was the military and local, government leadership who ran a community meeting to try to address, residents' concerns about these, military training or exercises. And what it meant was that these people came to the meeting not wanting to hear truth about it. They came, it seems, wanting to have their belief biases confirmed. And can we talk about that for a minute? I think that's really important.
That's a huge switch that's taken place. See, I'm already, if I've watched, X number of hours of disinformation or partial information or partial truth or minimal truth, if I've watched a certain amount of time, I'm going to come in to look for something that is going to validate what I've already know. I'm not going to come into a situation with beginner's mind and saying, yes, congressman, I now hear, or yes, state representative, I now hear that you're on top of this and this is what you've approved. And these were the things that, we see, and we're going to, this is the thing that we really need to trust you on because you've done the information. No, they're not doing that. They say, oh, representative, you are just saying something to calm us down. You're just saying something to explain something, but you know what? I don't know. I have too much evidence on my side. Really, they don't really have evidence. All they have is messaging. There's a big difference between I have messaging and I have evidence. And that's
Right.
where the line is really in bad shape.
Right, because what really happened is that, there were people putting messages out into the community, online, all different places that people were seeing that said, what are all these military people doing in here in Texas? What, and they were sowing seeds of doubt and skepticism over it being for legitimate purposes, like maybe the fact that we have this military personnel, and before we go and send them into a conflict situation to do their job, we sort of need to train them as to how to do that job. And
Right.
we need to do this. And so, the state of Texas agreed to do it, or these counties or towns agreed to let them, train, but people didn't believe it. They were being sold this alternate reality that the military was going to try and seek out dissidents and arrest them, or
political opponents, political adversaries, and it's going to do it. And that has been something that, I mean, the Russians and during the communists and the Eastern Bloc companies, they've done that kind of disinformation. You better not trust these people, therefore you don't want to vote. You don't want to do this thing because it's really not true. This is a counter message, instead of going like, no, I think it is true. I think that this thing is true that happened, is that, and it's so unsettling that we're not able to talk about advocate for our values, because the disinformation is occupying so much space. You can't fight for fairness if you're trying to argue over truth. No, this is true. But see, what happens is fairness is not taking place because the distractor is, you're arguing on what's true and what's not true, instead of going like, here's what fairness doesn't look like in the corporate world. Here's what fairness doesn't look like in the justice system. Here's what fairness doesn't look like in the medical thing. Here's what fairness doesn't look like in climate change. Here, I mean, we can't even get to those harder things because there is an argument over truth that doesn't actually need to be there. And you and I've mentioned on the show many times, Tom, is that the quickest way to get somebody to feel doubt is to question truth. The quickest way to get somebody to feel skeptical is to cultivate the need for trust not being met. So truth and trust have a direct emotional impact on the listener, even if it's not true. The illusion works just the same.
So, Bill, the irony here of this particular disinformation is that a military leader and spokesperson was invited to come to a community meeting by the local, I think, representative of the House of Representatives for this district or something like that. And they're there to have an open forum and to provide what they thought was going to calm people down. Truth. We're going to tell them exactly what we're doing, why we're here, and why we're not here. And they told them, and the people didn't believe them. And you and I have said many times that in certain situations, the truth doesn't matter. The facts are not going to help you.
They're not as powerful.
And so, and that being true, I'm wondering, Bill, what would that political leader or that military liaison, what could they have done differently in that situation to have achieved their goal?
It's such an unsettling statement of what I'm going to say next, that people will not believe what I'm going to say.
Well, I want to hear it anyway. Okay, I hear you.
People are not going to believe it.
Okay.
Because people that are listening are not, they're going to buy it. But there is literally somewhere between 3 to 5 sentences that need to be spoken before you give them the factual information. And those 3 to 5 sentences are to face the disinformation that they have received up to this point. You have to face the disinformation first before you can have a healthy discussion of truth. You got to face it. And facing it doesn't mean listening to it. Actually, facing means empathize with it. That's what facing it means.
So leading with the facts is not going to be helpful.
No, it's not helpful.
And 3 to 5 sentences, could you give me a for instance?
Sure. So, the facilitation of that meeting, which I've done many of these, would sound like this. Listen, I'd really like to make sure that people are being heard of their concerns. And I'd like to address these concerns one at a time to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I just gave a preemptive narrative of saying, I am interested in hearing what you've heard, because I want to know where where the disinformation has been planted. So I might get a sentence that says, we heard that Obama sent the military here to practice rounding up political dissonance to affect the vote of this state, or for whatever reason it is. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. It's hard to believe, but this is the sentence that needs to be spoken and dealt with. So I'm guessing that you feel, here's the sentence. So I'm guessing you're feeling worried, concerned, and scared to make sure that there is protection for the people of this city, of this county. Is that correct? The person then says, yes. All right. What do you need to hear from us about protection and safety about what you just said? Now, they don't know what that answer is.
Yeah, that surprised me when you said that, because I would think they wouldn't know the answer. They probably just want to, they want military to go away, probably.
Which would be an okay sentence, because guess what? So you would like the military to take this into another state just so it makes sure it doesn't happen here. Yes, notice the anxious and nervousness and panic is in the room, but at least I'm facing it. And I'm not allowing disinformation to take hold. I'm going like, no, I'm interested. So you'd really like us to move the training? Is that what you'd like us to move? Yeah, one person says. Okay, and one person might say, well, I just want to make sure it's approved. I just want to make sure someone's watching them. I just want to make sure. You need them to work on their own biases, not to disregard the truth and reinforce their biases. You want them to work on reframing their own bias so they can say, oh, well, what would really work for me is that the military would leave. Oh, so you would like them to not spend money here in the state and take the money that they're spending in the state for these military exercises. You'd rather have the military exercises done in a different state just so that you can have the safety. They'll go, no, we want them to spend the money here. They don't know which need they're going for right now. All they've been doing is sold one or two needs that their political voice or their vote isn't going to be heard. Meanwhile, it's like, okay, if the military took it nonchalantly and said this, or if the military representative would say, so would it work better for all of you for us to take the money that we would spend in this state and you would like us to move it to, let's say, Oklahoma or Nebraska, so we can get for us to do it in those environments so that you really just get the level of safety that you would like and take the revenue and move it there? Would that work better for you? The room would pivot because now all of a sudden you've introduced a different need. Now, I've also facilitated time where I write the needs up here and I put them in opposition with each other with two different whiteboards or flip charts or whatever. Okay, so you got financial security over here and you got safety and protection over here. I don't know. How can we get both of these things? Now, all of a sudden, the person is calming down because they've got to get into the civic agreement, and disinformation evaporates inside that room because it's going like, well, which one are we going to pick here? Now, it doesn't mean that people aren't walking out of the room going like, I feel a little unsettled, but also actually better. I felt like this was a good meeting. It's like I now see what the choices were that these different people were making, and I'm a human being and they're a human being and they're just making choices over there. And somehow another human being who was scared on the internet was working out their stuff. Well, I guess there's a problem with that guy. And because I was in the room, I was the person that experienced it. And just like the person, to loop this back around, Tommy, you'll see how weird this is going to get. Just like the person that is being handcuffed at out in the front of Comet Pizza feels calm and relieved, the people in this space walk out and said, you know what? We're going to decide on our economy and we're going to trust these people because at least they face my emotions and face my concerns. And they didn't try to talk over me. They didn't try to, give us a logical, rational example. They didn't fill my heads with facts that I don't believe. They dealt with my upset. So this is really kind of like, if I want to get rid of disinformation, it's the spotlight of empathy for the upset that gets rid of disinformation. But
Bill,
we're not in that place right now.
This is so misunderstood, or maybe that's not even the right word. People are so unaware.
Unaware. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
That
yeah.
That you cannot fight disinformation with the facts or the truth. You have to fight it with, and we must sound like broken records. I guess that dates me because who uses records today?
Records these days.
But we must sound like broken records though, because what it comes back to, Bill, again, is stepping into the issue with empathy and compassion. Does it not?
It does. It does. And a lot of people think that that's nice language. It is not nice language. Empathy is not nice language. It's protective language. When you're using empathy, when you're getting and you're advocating for a need and you're associating a feeling with it, it is one of the strongest narratives you can use towards people that are screaming at you, a child that's doing a tantrum, a spouse that's upset and repeating one of their greatest fears. You gotta sit in the space. Now, you and I, we're both parents, and it is hard to stare it down that that the upset is so large. But if you don't stare it down, disinformation gets to occupy the first 10 slots of a Google search. Most people don't go to the second page of Google to find the information, or the third or the fourth. We're not going 10, 20 down. We're not doing that because Google, the way the algorithm is searching, is bringing a bunch of junk information towards the top. It brings popularity to the top, not truth.
Well, and relevance to the term you searched on.
Right.
Which I gotta, sort of burst your bubble here if you think that truth is in any way something they use to determine relevance, because it's really not.
So upsetting. It's upsetting. And it allows a lot of cracks for people who want to meet their needs at the expense of others to work their way through. And that's one of the things that was really nice about this movie, but also extremely heart-wrenching and extremely disheartening to watch the physical impact and the emotional impact and the on many of the good-willed people that were at the at the business end of some of these propaganda campaigns. The workers at Comet Pizza getting harassed, the owner getting death threats, still getting death threats because it's on the internet, and it's on the internet, it's living forever. on the internet, because it just swirls around, and then people get to bring it back up. Oh, is that really the truth? Because I found it in a corner. It's like, no, you found a speck of dirt, clean it out, throw it out already. And so, and
Well,
there's many examples of this, many examples of
there
this in the
are
movie.
There are, and they're very well presented, I have to say. Fortunately, for Comet Pizza, and the owner really did think after this incident that his business was done. It was over. It was
He
not
did. He was going
going
to
to
quit. He
survive
was
it.
like done. No, yeah,
But
yeah,
all of his, not only employees who worked there and the people of the community, all wanted him to stay in business. They wanted to support this business. And I have to say, the community, it's very um, heartwarming to see how they rallied around this business to make sure it
right.
survived and that it did not become ultimately a casualty of disinformation.
Yeah, yeah. If somebody was in a disinformation piece and finds out that they were a part of this disinformation campaign, the reconciliation that's needed might look a little bit like, and the accountability and reconciliation might look like this: Sean Hannity eating pizza at that location, playing ping pong with kids. That's what it would look like. If I really, if it's like one of those things. If I rule the world, reconciliation, healing, truth telling would look like Sean Hannity and anybody else playing ping pong with a kid at that pizza shop, talking with the owner, sincere apology in front of the person, or an empathy sentence, which might have sounded like this coming out of Sean Hannity's mouth. I feel sad and disheartened at the level of pain that has come in your direction because of our following this story or reporting a story that wasn't true. It was and showed up as disinformation on my desk. We reported it so that we could be ahead of the curve, just in case it was true. And the impact was your business, your personal life, and your clients were threatened because of my actions. Do you think we're ever going to get that out of them?
No.
I feel doubtful and skeptical at the moment, but I'll tell you what, there is a wave of accountability showing up. I mean, the wave of accountability is you say things that are threatening, social media will take you down. And that's what Apple did with Alex Jones. And then all of a sudden, these other major people took him off the internet. And then he got angry and things and started yelling at another person. And then Twitter took him off.
Yeah,
And
Alex.
that's the wave of accountability that I'm hoping will show up in social medias, because they're not accountable to anybody. There's no government that's saying no, they're supposed to be operating out of ethics and integrity, but also they're trying to make their business model work, which is how many advertising clicks can I get? Because that's where they're getting paid the money. So why would I take down this person that's making me $1 million a year?
Well, very interestingly, Alex Jones figures into this documentary quite a bit, and they do talk about that and his business and a little bit of how it operates and how it actually was and why it was removed from many outlets that it was distributed through because of disinformation and disregard for the truth. So it's a partial victory, I think,
Yeah.
for the battle against disinformation. But there is some things that happen there, Bill, that I think, with Alex Jones in particular, that will make for a deeper dive in another episode, which I look forward to that.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things that sticks out of my head, if we want to, kind of put the ball on the tee here, is that when a journalist sits in front of a person, they're trained to look for the facts and ask for questions to cultivate the facts so they can then write a story about it. That's what they're looking to do. The problem is that the powers that be and the media and the social media that's at hand promotes illusion equally or even more so, and amplifies illusion because it gets more clicks. Sensationalism gets more clicks than a raw fact. And because if you get a raw fact, it's harder to sell features and benefits. It's easier to sell the smell of the steak than it is to sell the steak. It's easier to sell the branding slogan than it is to sell the quality of the product.
Or to me, it's I like your sizzle analogy. To me, here, Bill, we live in California, and out here there's an awful lot of Carl's Jr. fast food restaurants. You ever driven by a Carl's Jr. and like stopped at a stoplight right there and smell that smell that's coming out of their
Totally.
vents? And I'm like, oh my God, that smells so good. I mean, I literally have said that's like, oh, that makes me hungry. Makes me
Right there.
want to go in there and buy like 10 of whatever they're selling. And I think that's sort of an example, like you're saying, it's easier to sell the odor. I'm thinking of somehow all of a sudden now I'm going to date myself again. I'm having a Spaceballs moment, and I can see Mel Brooks opening the can of Perry air and smelling the canned air from the planet Druidia. And they could sell the smell of Carl's Jr. as an air freshener better than they could sell the food, probably. I'm sorry, this is not really a comedy show, but
it is a part of how easy the brain is getting hijacked. It is a part of how sensitive we are as a human animal. And a big part of the show is that we're sensitive to language in the same kind of way as that we're sensitive to smell. I mean, language creates a molecule of emotion. And what's the difference between a propaganda campaign and a marketing campaign? The answer is not much.
I was going to say very little.
The answer is not much difference. There's like one selling a little bit more lie than the other one is. One propaganda is selling their need at the detriment to the needs of the many. I mean, that's a propaganda is trying to implant a derogatory message that's at the expense of the group. So in the movie, they get into this with the phrase, they say, Putin must be really smiling because he doesn't have to do much, because now we're just taking it out on ourselves. Now we're just imploding on the inside. He's just sitting back and going like, oh my gosh, all I have to do is stoke this a little bit. And they're imploding from the inside. And it's partly true, because we kind of are, because all you got to do is sit down and watch a countervailing narrative back and forth, and you're shaking your head going like, oh my gosh, and no one is saying no one's really actually literally getting evidence and even bringing other brands into it to validate their truth. So like, for example, the dialogue with masks for the health crisis, right?
Right.
Why is it news media fully covering the lengths that the professional teams are going to protect their players. And why is that not good enough for the common person? If I was in charge of a news department, I go like, here's the story I want. I want a story about whatever city it is and whatever pro team it is in that city. And I want to amplify the work and the strain that they're going to keep their people from getting sick. Because if they lose one of these multi-million-dollar players, and why is that not as valuable as losing the regular citizen? I mean,
whoa,
that is must-see TV right there.
Definitely.
It really, really is. So we got to do our best to purchase truth back. You know, like truth, you got to fight for it. And in this case, it's not an Alex Jones rant. It is an empathetic, clear-minded, adult narrative about here's what protection for people look like. Here's what fairness looks like in a capitalist society. I mean, you got to like start fighting the value, and that's what we can get into next time, because you can see there's a dozen rabbit holes we can go down pretty quickly.
Well, there are a dozen, and there are a lot of really good examples. And it's not that we're going to sort of, with subsequent episodes here, beat a dead horse like, oh my gosh, guys, you're still talking about after truth. But there are so many valuable things to discuss here that in different ways, it's not the same thing over and over. And I really look forward to some of these, Bill, especially when it comes to some of the things around trying to create disinformation around the Mueller report before it was published. And in particular, some of the journalists that were involved in that. And there's so many great things to learn there, among other things. So I think I like that we're sort of going to take a little bit deeper dive into a few of these things over time. And I look forward to continuing that with you.
Yeah, a lot of fun, Tom. All right. Thanks a million.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.